In terms of lighting, we use three main types in our production. These were daylight, softbox lamps, and adjustable studio lighting. We used the softboxes in particular to try and get the right sort of light for each indoor scene, allowing for enough light to help simulate daylight. However, whilst this was somewhat effective, as the control of lighting helped us to control the mood of each scene, I think we could have done a better job in lighting the scenes, since one or two of these scenes were met with very bright and concentrated light from the softboxes. For example, in the transition from day to night in the living room, Jack's character, Andrew, can be seen with a lot of light on the back of his head, which is something that I think could have been improved if we had had more time to refilm. Also, focusing on the adjustable studio lighting, if we were to create this production again, I would try and use prior knowledge in setting up lighting, as it was quite time consuming to try and make sure that there was no or little shadow seen in the shot behind the face of the entity, spoiling the desired effect. However, this was a technology that I had not used before, especially with the light of adjusting intensity. It was harder to control the shadows without knowing how to control the light to minimize the shadows because it was a new technology. On reflection, I do think that we had some success from lighting, but if we controlled it more carefully, I think we would have been able to carefully set different tones for some of the scenes, making the mood more effective and successful by following the convention of a darker tone and more thrilling theme, making for a better opening sequence overall. We used a small external microphone primarily for the scenes outside, so that we did not pick up any wind noise interrupting the speech. So instead we recorded our lines inside, reduced the bass in Audacity, and recorded some ambient sound from the outside environment, so that during post-production we could simulate this outside environment. However, we still gain all of the sound quality from the microphone so that the characters are easy to hear. We also used the microphone to record lines because in some shots the characters would be too far away from the camera to be heard properly. This technology was not too difficult to use, as I have handled external microphones before. The use of this microphone was effective because you could hear everything being said, whereas some external forces like wind or cars could have obstructed the audio had we not used the microphone. On reflection, I think that if we had had more time, we could have used the audio from the microphone for the rest of the production to make the production sound better. We recorded the audio for some scenes in the production, however, these were separate to the video files and therefore we did not have enough time to sync them up and make sure that they sounded good enough to be used. Nevertheless, I still think that this would have made the production better and it would have built a better atmosphere in the scene for the audience. In Audacity, we used a bass removal effect for the outside sequences to make the speech that we recorded on the external microphone for the outside sequences sound like it is outside, and so that wind noise was more limited. This was effective because it added more realism instead of a more studio-like quality to the outside sound. We also used Audacity to muffle the sound of the phone ringing to add realism as it is in Jonathan's pocket before he gets it out. I had used Audacity a little bit before this, but not really in terms of audio manipulation and effects. However, with a simple interface, it was not too hard to reach the desired effect after looking online on how to make the speech sound outside rather than close up to the mic with the more professional effect. If we had had more time, then I think it would have been better, as with the external microphone, to use Audacity to manipulate the sound in other scenes of the opening sequence, possibly adding effects when Andrew encounters the entity, because he is walking more dizzily and hallucinating. So it might have been effective to add some of this at the start of this part of the opening sequence, then let the soundtrack take over and provide the climactic part of the opening sequence with some more intensity in terms of atmosphere. In the editing software Sony Vegas, I created the effect of the entity. I was inspired by a YouTube tutorial I had seen a while ago, and on remembering it, I thought that the use of a transparent type entity coming alive in our production would be effective to thrill the audience and hopefully stick with other thriller conventions. The tutorial of this task showed how easily the effect was achieved, and it did not make me struggle with the editing software. However, I do not find too much difficulty with Sony Vegas, since I have used it for some years for personal projects, so it was easy to use. However, I think had I done this again, that the image of the entity could have been significantly improved, since I think it should have been more subtle, and while seeing the face itself could keep the audience watching, I think it would be more effective and successful to keep the audience wondering what it looks like, by adding a more subtle effect, and lowering the depth of the face more, along with the flaring, because while the red and blue flares may make the face seem more creepy against its transparent face, I think it could have been better to make this more subtle, which would hopefully have made it more creepy, and when important, action-packed parts of the film occur, the audience will be more thrilled by not seeing the entity in full, and this would also keep them guessing on whether or not the entity is merely a figment of imagination, or whether there is something more to the existence of the entity. On reflection, whilst I think the entity is aesthetically quite pleasing, I think that the effects in Sony Vegas could have been used more effectively to follow the conventions of other thriller texts and thrilling the audience more, making it more successful.